Hi, Todd Martin here with the Walking Code. In this video, I'm going to describe rotation and counter-rotation of the core as it pertains to walking technique. Remember, if you like this video, please share it, subscribe, and click on the like button. In this video, we're going to discuss rotation and counter-rotation of the core used in walking. When I'm talking about rotation of the core, I'm describing rotation that is created in three separate elements of our core: rotation of our upper torso, rotation of our lower torso, and then rotation that is controlled by our hip joints. All three of these elements of the core are used to determine what direction we are moving when we walk. The rotation of the upper part of the core is controlled by our upper abdominal muscles. The rotation of the lower part of the core, or my lower torso, is controlled by rotation of my lower abdominal muscles. And you can see that also rotates my hips when I turn my lower abs. And rotation of the core is also generated from action of my hip joints. If I flex my right hip, it pulls my body in this direction, so rotating towards that flexing hip. If I extend my right hip, it pushes my body in the opposite direction. So I get rotational movement from rotation of my upper torso, rotation of my lower torso, and the action of the hip joints, all working in coordination with each other. So we use this rotation when we move naturally, even though most of us don't think about it a lot. But if you just think about it logically, we can move around in all kinds of directions when we walk, and that's not controlled by my feet. They're not telling me where to go. I'm directing this from my core like a big steering wheel, but it's much more complicated than a steering wheel that just goes clockwise or counterclockwise. It has different combinations of movement that allow the freedom of movement that we have as human beings. Since the rotation of the core is largely invisible, we can use a couple visual aids when we're trying to practice rotation and recognize what sort of rotation we're doing. I'd like to use the arms to reflect the rotation of the upper torso, because my arms are connected to my upper torso. When I turn my right upper torso to the left, it projects my right arm forward. When I turn my left upper torso to the right, it projects my left arm forward. So I like to use the arms to reflect which direction my upper torso is turning in. The belly button can be used to reflect the direction of rotation of the lower core, or the lower abs. When I rotate my lower abs to the right, my belly button turns to the right. When I rotate my lower abs to the left, my belly button turns to the left. I mentioned we'll be looking at rotation and counter-rotation. When I say rotation, I'm talking about rotating the upper torso and lower torso in the same direction. So both going either clockwise or counterclockwise. But I can also turn my upper torso and my lower torso in opposite directions. So I can turn my upper torso clockwise while I'm turning my lower torso counterclockwise, and that gives me a different type of movement than when I turn my upper and lower torso together in the same direction. I'm going to step back now and show you three different steps that use rotation and counter-rotation at different points of the step. My left leg forward, my right leg back, and we're going to take a step first turning to the right, then moving straight forward, and then turning to the left. And we're going to see how the core is used differently in the three different movements. Now, the first thing we'll need to understand is there are two different phases to each step. During phase one of a step, I'm going to change my weight or shift forward to the standing leg. And then in phase two, I'm going to swing through, and that's when my rear leg is going to swing forward to complete the step. the rotation in each of these phases can be the same or it can be different. And the hip actions during each one of these phases is also going to change, and that's how I power the walk. So I'm going to step back, and in order to step forward, what I'm doing is turning my upper torso on the left, while at the same time turning my lower abs counterclockwise and lifting my right hip forward, or flexing my right hip. So upper torso clockwise, lower torso counterclockwise, and it pulls my body forward to this position. If I do it from the side view, upper torso's turning clockwise, lower torso's turning counterclockwise, essentially pulling my body forward to the standing leg now, which is going to be my left leg. This hip is flexing or pulling forwards, but it doesn't swing through because of this rotational energy of the upper torso is actually creating a backwards energy on this right leg, which makes the natural position here on the ground. I can briefly lift it up, but the natural position's here. It doesn't shift me forward just by lifting this hip off the ground. This is the natural endpoint to the motion. So I've used torsional or counter rotation of the core, clockwise rotation of the upper torso, counterclockwise rotation of the lower torso to pull my body forward during the first part of the step. The second part of the step is going to be powered by changing my hip action from my right hip to my left hip. So I have my counter rotation of the torso, flexion of my right hip. To complete a forward step, I'm going to change that lifting forward from the right hip to lifting forward from the left hip, and that's what generates a forward step. So the two phases: torsional rotation of the left side of my core with flexion of my right hip, and now torsional rotation with the left side of the core with flexion of the left hip. That's what creates a straight forward step. Now let's look at turning clockwise. Let's start from the same position, and I'm going to use the same clockwise rotation of my upper torso when I change weight, but I'm also going to use clockwise rotation of the lower torso as I change weight. So this is what I call concordant rotation. Both the upper torso and lower torso are turning in the same direction, and you can see how it begins to turn my body as I shift my weight forward. Again, I'm flexing or pulling forward with my right hip as I create the turn. That's the initiation of the motion. Clockwise turn of the upper torso, clockwise turn of the lower torso, and pulling forward from the right hip. Again, the right leg is still sealed to the ground because I have all this energy turning into it. It can't release. Now, in order to finish the step, I'm going to again change my hip energy from lifting forward from my right hip to lifting forward from my left hip, and I'm going to change my weight, meaning change the lower torso rotation from clockwise to counterclockwise at the same time I change the hip energy, and that is going to create the final step energy or the swing through. The weight shift with concordant rotation, clockwise rotation of the upper and lower torso, and then when I swing through, I'm going to switch to counter rotation or torsional rotation. So now I have clockwise rotation of the upper torso, counterclockwise rotation of the lower torso. So my belly button is turning towards this leg, my upper torso and my arm is turning towards this leg. Concordant rotation, counter rotation. Concordant rotation, counter rotation. When I stepped forward, I had counter rotation and continued with counter rotation. Now let's see a turn going to the left or counterclockwise. I'm going to start from the same position. Now I'm going to use concordant rotation, both my upper and lower torso turning towards the forward leg during the change of weight. And now you'll notice that my right leg didn't stay glued to the ground. It actually lifted forward because there's no backwards energy going there. All the energy is going this way, and that pulls the right leg forward during the change of weight. And then now during the swing through, I'm going to go back to counter rotation or torsional rotation. So watch this closely. I'm going to turn my upper torso that way, clockwise, as I take the step. This is just the same as each of the 3 swing through steps that I just did. Counter rotation during the swing through, but I've already set up a counterclockwise turn during the change of weight. So even though my upper torso is turning this way, when I swing through, my body's going to turn counterclockwise. I've set up the counterclockwise turn during the change of weight, and then even though I go back to the counter rotation here, it turns me counterclockwise. So I have 3 different step options. I can take a step to the right by beginning with concordant rotation to the right. I can have a straightforward step by beginning and ending with torsional rotation on the left, and then I can have a leftward turn beginning with concordant rotation to the left, followed by counter rotation on the swing through. So 3 different options of stepping. I'm going to show you another 4th option, which we don't use practically speaking, but what happens if I continue with the concordant rotation during the swing through. As I step forward with concordant rotation, counterclockwise with the upper and lower torso, if I change my hip energy and pull forward with my left hip and continue this rotation, what happens is this. I actually begin to step backwards. Let's show that again. Counterclockwise concordant rotation. I'm flexing my right hip forward, and then now I'm going to lift forward with my left hip to generate the power of the step. But since everything is turning this way, it actually is going to create a backwards movement of my body. So now I have 4 different turns. A turn to the right caused by concordant clockwise rotation, followed by torsional rotation or contra rotation or counter rotation. I have a forward step caused by counter rotation and continued counter rotation. I have a counterclockwise step caused by concordant rotation, followed by counter rotation. And then I have an actual back step with concordant rotation, followed by continued concordant rotation when I flex my left hip. Now what I'm going to show is how we continue turning. If I'm going to walk in a continuous clockwise circle, I started with this turn here, and then now I can use the same energy that I used with my left hand turn, but I'm going to turn it to the right using concordant rotation followed by torsional rotation to continue my step in the circle. And then now I can continue this in order to continue walking in a circle. Concordant rotation followed by torsional rotation. Concordant rotation followed by torsional rotation. Concordant rotation followed by torsional rotation. And then I have a continuous circle. This is a good thing to practice to understand how our core moves and how it directs our body. Thanks for watching.